Every now and then, my brothers-in-law and I manage to get together for a night of poker. It's not something we do often. In fact, we only play a few times a year. One such occasion arose when our wives planned a joint shopping trip, which gave us the perfect opportunity to play a few hands. My wife, Anita, has both a sister and a brother that evening. Her brother, David Cooper, invited Paul Marshall to join our game at his place. Dave sat to my left with Paul directly across from me. Both of them are lawyers at Cooper Lewis. And Carter is the most successful law firm in our area. Anita's father, George, was one of the original partners. He bought out the other two, so now the firm is entirely under Cooper family control. Anita and her sister, Hannah, whom everyone in the family calls Han, are also attorneys. Han married Kevin Russell, a civil engineer who sat to my right during the game. He's a pretty straightforward guy, and I get along with him quite well. As for me, I'm Nathan Lawson, I'm an Irish non-lawyer in the family, and these two facts have caused a bit of consternation among my in-laws. Luckily, Anita's mother, Margaret, took a liking to me. Otherwise, I don't know how I would have made it through the constant teasing from old George and Dave. I'm a mason by trade, working with brick, mortar, and concrete. My father was a mason before me, and I've never wanted to pursue anything else. He made me attend school to learn the craft. I went to school to learn the ins and outs of the trade. I thought I could learn everything I needed from him, since he could lay block across the entire state and be within a quarter of an inch of square and level. What more could there be to know? Turns out, there was plenty. After 2 years of schooling, I joined my dad in the business. I was putting my education to use, making improvements to the materials and mixtures we used. I modernized and mechanized our operations whenever possible, introducing new, faster methods for building with brick and block. Dad taught me the difference between just throwing up masonry and true craftsmanship. Together, we figured out how to maintain the quality of our work while completing projects more efficiently. As our business grew, we hired 3 additional men to keep up with the demand. By the time I was 27, I was a partner in a thriving enterprise. That's when I met Anita. We had run into trouble with a supplier who took our deposit but failed to deliver the materials. I got in touch with the Cooper law firm to see what our options were. Anita was signed to our case. She was 26 and the most stunning woman I'd ever seen. She handled our lawsuit and we got our money back without going to court. By then I was completely captivated by her. Whenever a payment was late or a delivery was delayed, I'd try to convince my father. Finally said one afternoon as we were laying blocks for a massive house in the Poconos, "Why don't you just ask that girl out?" It had saved me a ton of money and kept me on good terms with our clients and suppliers. We can't sue every Tom, Dick, and Harry. Harry, just so you have an excuse to see that red-headed lawyer. I was taken aback. How did he know I wanted to see Anita again? Was it that obvious? You must think I'm oblivious. My father chuckled. It's clear that girl has you all tied up in knots. I was the same way with your mother, but I didn't need flimsy excuses to see her. I kept after her until she finally agreed to marry me. I finally got her to agree to marry me, but Dad, she's a lawyer. I protested, I'm just a mason. Why would she be interested in someone like me? You have no idea what women really want. I'm no expert, but I know one thing, you're a darn good mason. Maybe the best. I've never seen you apologize for making an honest living with your hands. She probably spends her days surrounded by slick, talking, backstabbing types and is tired of them. Be a man. Ask her out and don't act like you're not good enough. If she turns you down, try again in a week. It took me 2 months to get your mother. Agreeing to go out with me for the rest of the week was a whirlwind of thought, centered around my father's advice. It's funny how time changes how we see things. At 17, I was sure he didn't understand anything. Being near him felt like it made me doubt my own intellect. But somehow, in the 10 years since, he had become remarkably wise. I'd made up my mind, so I headed to the parking lot outside Anita's office as the workday ended. I was still in my dirty, sweat-soaked work clothes. I hadn't bothered to go home and clean up. I knew that if I did, my resolve might falter. "Hi, Anita," I said, greeting her perhaps a bit nervously. "I'm not sure if you remember me." She chuckled. "Nathan Lawson, right. Of course I remember you. You're having more issues with your suppliers, actually. My problem is that I can't get you out of my mind," I confessed, surprising myself with my candor. "I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me or maybe catch a movie." She raised an eyebrow with a playful grin. "Well, I really hope you'll take a shower first." That's when I noticed someone approaching from behind, turning slightly. I saw a man who looked a lot like Anita. He had a smirk on his face before he even spoke. "Is she planning a date with this hardworking gentleman?" he sneered. "Maybe a gourmet meal at a fast food joint followed by an exhilarating documentary on dam construction. If he dares to touch you, we'll spot the dusty handprints all over." I realized this was her brother, Dave, from his cutting remarks and familial resemblance. I knew that reacting angrily wouldn't serve me well. His words stung, and for a moment I considered retreating to salvage my pride. But then my father's words echoed in my mind, urging me to stand firm. "Anita, would you like to go out with me?" I repeated this time with more determination. She glanced between me and her SM bug brother, then reached out to take my hand and walk with me. "Nathan, we don't need an audience for this conversation," she said, casting a pointed look at Dave. "Let's go for a walk." We strolled away, making our way to a small park nearby. We found a bench under the shade of a large tree and sat down. Anita sighed softly before turning to face me. "You've just had the pleasure of meeting my brother, Dave," she began. Her tone was a mix of affection and frustration. "I love him," she continued, "but he's incredibly snobbish and self-centered. My father was the same way whenever someone showed interest in me or my sister. They'd turn into gatekeepers, determined to drive them away. In their eyes, no one is ever good enough." She paused, her gaze searching. "I want you to understand what you'd be getting into by going out with me. Their ridicule and insults can be relentless. I would love to say yes, but I don't want you to endure their torment because of me. If meeting Dave and hearing all this makes you reconsider, I'll understand." I took a deep breath, feeling a surge of confidence. "How does 7? Her face lit up with a genuine smile. 7. It was 7 o'clock, and so began a courtship filled with obstacles. Her father and brother were without a doubt the most challenging individuals I'd ever encountered. They employed every tactic imaginable to discourage me, from snide remarks to cold shoulders to outright confrontations. But my feelings for Anita were I was determined to go ahead with the wedding, and I wasn't going to let them stand in the way. Just over 18 months later, we exchanged vows and became husband and wife. Over time, even George and Dave began to soften, albeit gradually. The arrival of our 2 children, Mary and George, certainly helped to bridge the gap. It's ironic how the son, and as it turned out, the man they once disapproved of, became the father of the grandchildren they cherished most. Anita's mother, Margaret, had been my ally from the very beginning. Her warmth and acceptance meant a lot to me. Even after 17 years of marriage, she treated me like her own son. Our regular poker games were a big part of that. Normally, Anita's cousin would be the 4th player, but he wasn't available this time. Instead, Dave invited his friend Paul to join us. Paul was a wild card, talkative to the point of exhaustion and overly confident in his supposed charm with women. He was also a reminder of Anita's he and I had dated briefly before she went to law school. To put it mildly, he was a constant thorn in my side since I moved back to Montreal 6 months ago. I've been with at least 10 different women. Paul bragged unabashedly during the game. 7 of them were married. There's just something it's really exciting being with another man's wife. It gets the adrenaline going. Paul, you could find yourself in trouble even if someone doesn't confront you directly. You could end up in lawsuits and other legal messes. Kev warned me that this could seriously tarnish your reputation. Paul laughed off the concern, embracing the bad boy persona. He said that actually boosts my business. Men respect me, and women know I'm a powerhouse. They seek me out for advice. One day, you might target the wrong woman. She could report you to the boss. Kev cautioned, you might want to think twice. I wouldn't think twice about asking you to leave if you harassed a married woman. Old George won't be around much longer, Paul replied casually. Dave, you'll be running the show soon, and you can count on my support. But I wouldn't want to find myself in that situation. My sisters will have a big say in the company's decisions, Dave said. Well, in that case, I'll just have to win them over, won't I? Paul laughed. I couldn't hold back any longer. Slamming my cards on the table, I stood up abruptly. I'm done with this. I'm done with this game and with this arrogant jerk. I announced, hey, it's not my fault you can't keep your wife satisfied. Paul retorted, I offer a service for wives who need proper attention, and I'd bet Anita is one of them. I hissed, if you so much as look at Anita the wrong way, you'll regret it. Dave and Kev both tried to calm the situation. That's just Paul's twisted sense of humor. Dave attempted to soothe me. Kev, take it to heart, Nathan. He didn't mean anything by it. Oh, but I did. Paul snarled, you can't expect a bricklayer to understand women or know how to please them. Women are drawn to men of power and sophistication. If he even knows what that means, you pompous fool. I spat back, I've said what I needed to say, and you've been warned. Stay away from Anita. I'm not afraid of you, brick boy. I've decided to take you up on your challenge. I'll have. Your wife will forget all about you in no time, Paul boasted confidently. Once I'm through with her. I moved to confront him, but Dave and Kev quickly stepped between us. He's just trying to provoke you, Kev reasoned. You know Anita wouldn't give him a second glance. Don't let his words and your temper get you into trouble, Dave said. Well, forget you too, Paul shouted. I'll pursue Han as well. I'll show both of them what a real man is. Paul was practically spitting as he spoke, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. I placed a hand on Kev's shoulder to hold him back. I wasn't sure he could handle Paul, and if things escalated, I wanted to be the one to deal with him. The game is over, Dave declared firmly. Kev and Nathan, please leave. We all need to cool off. I nodded, recognizing the wisdom in Dave's words. It was time to take a step back and let things calm down. After all, it was Dave's house. When a man asks me to leave his home, I respect his wishes. I expect the same when I ask someone to leave mine. That's just how I see it. A man's home is his sanctuary. Kev and I turned and made our way to the door. He was still muttering under his breath, and I was no less agitated. Paul was truly insufferable. I decided not to mention the incident to Anita, at least not yet. Until things had settled down and I could plan my next move, one thing was certain, Paul would regret any harm or distress he caused my family. By Monday evening, Anita greeted me at the door with a cold beer and a curious expression. She asked me what happened after I left the poker game early on Saturday night. I told her. She was fishing for details. After mulling it over, I concluded that honesty was the best approach. My best approach with Anita is to be straightforward and honest. I trusted she'd know how to handle Paul. I left early because Dave asked Kev and me to leave. I told her there's more to it than that. Didn't Paul confront you and tell you to stay away from me? I see it as a warning, not a threat. I replied calmly, no man gets to say he's going to pursue my wife while I'm still around. I'm sure Paul didn't. She said, phrase it like that. He told me you were hostile toward him, thinking you're still jealous because I dated him before meeting you. Dave seems to agree with his version. You overreacted to an innocent comment, didn't you? For some reason, Dave is so taken with Paul that he's not thinking straight. I explained that they both believe your father is nearing retirement and that Dave will soon take over the firm. Paul plans to be his right. He's also trying to get close to you and Han, thinking he can charm Dave's sisters and any other woman he fancies. Nathan, that doesn't make sense. Anita said that Han and I have a lot of influence over company decisions, and Dave knows that Paul is aware of it too. That's why he thinks he needs to win you and Han over. I said he believes that once he's ingratiated himself with the Cooper sisters, you'll bend to his will for another taste of his, so he said his name was Allure. He seems convinced that your fate is already decided. Nathan, Dave is my brother. He would never condone such behavior from Paul. Anita exclaimed indignantly, "You're blowing this way out of proportion. I've never seen you so jealous." Gently lifting her so our faces were level, I gazed into her eyes. "I love you more than words can express," I told her. "But I won't tolerate any betrayal. Nor will I stand by while that man. He's trying to harm our family. Kev, don't underestimate me. I know you might think Dave and Paul wouldn't say such things. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt because Dave is your brother and you care about him. Just don't be deceived by Paul's lies." She suddenly laughed, a mischievous glint in her eye. "You're quite the strong man holding me like this. Do you think I'm afraid of you, Nathan Lawson? I know you'd never hurt me. The kids are at my mom's tonight, so you might want to put me down or prove why I don't need anyone else. If you're up to it, I'd love to see you try." I went to the bedroom to show her that I was the man she needed. At least, that's what I thought. As time went on, I noticed that Anita didn't mention Paul much anymore. He worked with her every day, so why had he disappeared from our conversations after the fight at the poker game? I got closer to Kev, my brother. And oh, he was really mad at Paul for saying Han was unfaithful. Paul had really got under Kev's skin. Whenever we met, we'd talk about Paul and his schemes and who might be involved in them. Kev told me he'd asked Donna Palmer, George's secretary, to keep an eye on things. He even told her his concerns about the workplace dynamics affecting his wife. Kev quickly realized Donna held no fondness for Paul and was more than willing to assist. So far, Donna hadn't reported anything unusual. The absence of information about Paul's activities made me more anxious rather than relieved. Had he suddenly transformed into a model employee? My instincts told me no. He told me that people don't change that quickly. I watched Anita closely, trying to be more attentive and present. She seemed to appreciate the extra attention, and I was rewarded for it more than once as the nights unfolded. Yet despite my efforts, a nagging feeling persisted one evening over dinner. I noticed a distant look in her eyes. "Anita's eyes are everything, right?" I asked gently. She blinked as if snapping out of a trance. "Yes, sorry, just thinking about a challenging case at work," she replied with a faint smile. I wanted to believe her, but the unease gnawed at me. I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands. My family was at stake, and I wasn't about to stand by idly. The family was organizing a big celebration for Margaret and George's 50th wedding anniversary. It was a big deal, and everyone was expected to attend. Even distant relatives in our Irish family were expected to come. Anita and her sister Han was in charge of most of the arrangements, with some help from their brother Dave and his wife Julia. Dave had met Julia when she was a temporary employee at the firm. Interestingly, no one in the family questioned Julia's background or whether she was a suitable match for Dave. Unlike the scrutiny Kev and I faced when we started dating his sisters, perhaps Julia's laugh and last name Ryan had more influence in the Cooper family than Kev's surname, Russell. I never quite understood why that was. The party was set for Friday, July 15th, the exact date George and Margaret had married 50 years ago. She's an excellent lawyer because she's so meticulous. She anticipates every possible issue, both in the courtroom and in daily life. Around noon on the Friday of the party, I got a call from Kev Nathan. He said that Donna had overheard part of a phone conversation. Paul had told someone to meet him at the Tuck-In at 3 o'clock. I'm not sure where Han is right now. If I call her cell, she might say she's anywhere. Do you know where Anita is? I know she had some last-minute errands, like picking up flowers. I'll let the crew know I'm leaving early and stopping by the motel before 3. I'll keep you posted on what happens. Wait, I'm coming with you. Kev insisted. I'll be at the coffee shop near my office. Pick me up on your way. The problem was his office wasn't exactly on the route to the motel. Time was tight. It was already after 2. I agreed to pick up Kev, even though it would cost us precious minutes. He'd included me in the plan, so I said, "All right, Kev. Just make sure you're ready when I pull up. We can't afford any delays." By the time I picked Kev up in front of the coffee shop, it was 10 minutes to 3. I gave him a quick nod, and we merged back into traffic. We were cutting it close, but we made it to the parking lot of a convenience store next to the motel. I pulled up at the motel with just a minute to spare. I picked a spot that offered a clear view of the motel and its rooms. It was an older establishment with about 20 units, all facing the parking area. I turned off the engine, and there he was. Kev muttered, "He looks pretty pleased with himself, doesn't he?" We watched as Paul, who seemed rather cheerful, walked up to one of the. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and closed it behind him. Kev glanced at me, silently asking what our next move should be. We hadn't really thought this through. Should we confront him? What if he was meeting someone else entirely? What if the person hadn't arrived yet? I don't want to do anything rash and end up in trouble. After a moment, I said, "Let's wait." We decided to wait and see who else shows up. If anything's happening, barging in now won't change it. Kev agreed this probably isn't the first time he's met someone here. I just hope it's not one of our wives. We sat there for about 15 minutes with no activity. Then Paul emerged from the room, closed the door behind him, and walked back to his car. He drove off quickly, leaving. We were left wondering what had happened. A few minutes later, the door opened again and a woman stepped out. It was unbelievable. Kev whispered it was Anita, hurrying around the side of the building. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. It felt like my world had just been turned upside down. "Nathan, let me have Han talk to Anita." Kev pleaded, softly. I thought, there's no way she actually wants to be with that guy. This must be some horrible mistake. I'm sure she'll regret it soon enough. I muttered, starting the engine and pulling out of the parking lot. Kev continued trying to calm me down as we drove. When we reached his office, he was still offering words of reassurance. Maybe there's another explanation. He suggested we don't jump to conclusions just yet. As Kev was stepping out of the truck, I couldn't hold back any longer. "If you were in my shoes, Kev, what would you do?" I demanded. He paused, then admitted he'd probably act impulsively and regret it later. "But you're smarter than that, Nathan. Think about the kids. If nothing else, why didn't Anita?" I retorted angrily, "Think about the kids. I'll handle this in my own way." I might not be Irish, but a cold beer always helped me clear my head. I pulled into a local bar and downed a couple of drinks. No brilliant solutions came to mind. I realized I wasn't the cunning type. I dealt with things head on. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But it was my way. I started to realize just how important Anita was in my life. She was more than just a passionate partner, she was incredible in that regard. She was my best friend and my anchor. Suddenly, I felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of confusion. My heart ached like never before. My phone rang. It was Anita. "Nathan, where are you? You're supposed to be at Mom's by now. It's after 5. And everyone's wondering where you are," she said, with a hint of frustration in her voice. I considered telling her off, but thought better of it. Maybe this was the perfect time to let her and her entire family know that I was aware of her betrayal. That would give old George something to talk about. I was too late to change out of my work clothes, but I decided I didn't care if my appearance bothered the Coopers. So be it. In 10 minutes, I'd be there. I was walking into the backyard of Anita's parents' house. My jaw was set, and I was getting pretty wound up. I'd spotted Paul's Mercedes parked out front. This was shaping up to be quite the party. "Nathan, let's grab a drink." My treat. Kev called out before I could locate Anita or Paul. I ran into Margaret. "I'm so glad you made it." She gave me a big hug. "It wouldn't have been the same without you." As I leaned down to kiss her cheek, I realized that Margaret was someone I never wanted to hurt. But the situation was getting out of control, and I couldn't stop it from having consequences for Margaret. Over her shoulder, I saw Paul by the bar, telling a story to anyone who'd listen. He was stepping away from Margaret. I went straight for him. He saw me coming and knew something was up. He put his drink down and stood up straight as I got close. "I warned you," I said in a low, steady voice. "Now it's time to face the consequences." His right fist flew out and hit my chin. My head snapped back, and I felt a sharp pain shoot down my neck. I shook it off and looked him in the eye. "Anita told you everything, Paul." I sneered. I knew she couldn't keep quiet as he spoke. He swung again, hitting me on the left side of my face. The crowd around us fell silent. The only sound was the impact of his punches. I wasn't exactly the most beloved member of the Cooper clan, but Anita was cherished. Paul had just insulted her at a family gathering. It was a grave mistake. Reaching up to rub my cheek, I realized Paul had no idea what he had just unleashed. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I grabbed him by the lapels of his suit jacket and swung him around, slamming him against the wall of a nearby tool shed. He hit it so hard I wondered if the structure might collapse. I pinned him there with my left hand, pulling back my right fist. This confrontation was about to reach its climax. Nathan called out sharply from behind me. It was Anita. She hadn't exactly yelled. She'd used that tone she saved for the most serious situations. I froze, my right fist still clenched and ready to smash Paul Marshall's smug face. "I'll deal with you later," I growled. "I've got something to handle," but Anita didn't back down. She stepped right in front of me, pressing her head against the arm that still held Paul in place. "Deal with me later," she shot back. Her voice was tight. "I don't know what you think you're saying, Nathan, but you'll deal with me." "Anita, you just admitted everything." "I don't think it matters, but I saw you leaving that motel today." Her reaction was immediate, like I'd slapped her. She flinched, but then her chin lifted and she met my eyes head on. "If you honestly believe I'd betray you for this person, then you might as well hit me too," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Go ahead, Nathan. If I've done what you think I did, I deserve it. Slap me." I'd never seen Anita like this before. She was so raw and emotional. Her lip quivered, and her voice was unsteady as she threw her words at me. She knew me well enough to understand that no matter what, I would never lay a hand on her. Yet doubt started to creep into my mind. If you trust me, if you love me like I believe you do, you'll let him go and give me a chance to explain. But if I mean that little to you, if you're willing to throw everything away, if you think that's what happened, then fine. Hit him. Hit me too, if you want. After all, if a woman cheats on her husband, she must be loyal and devoted. That's what Nathan deserves. I was stuck. Paul was starting to recover, squirming in my grip. If I was going to knock him out, it had to be now. But what if Anita hadn't cheated? What if there was more to the story? What if there was some other reason she'd been at that motel? I looked at Anita and realized I couldn't. I couldn't give up on her. I couldn't deny her anything, even after all these years. Just being close to her still did something to me. I let Paul go. That's when it happened. Paul swung a wild punch over Anita's shoulder, landing a solid hit on my left eye. I'm a tough guy, but that shot made my knees wobble. I heard Anita swear, followed by the unmistakable sounds of a fight. I'd been in enough brawls to recognize the heavy thuds of fists. Anita wrapped her arms around me and steadied me as I staggered back. My left eye was almost swollen shut, but I could still see what was happening. Dave Cooper was laying into Paul, his fists flying. Kev and a couple of our cousins rushed over and grabbed Dave, pulling him away before he did any permanent damage. Dave was breathing hard, his face flushed with anger. He ran his hands over his face, trying to calm down. "Cowardly bastard, get out of here," he ordered, his voice shaking with fury. "I don't want to see him for another second, or I won't be responsible for what I do." A few guys grabbed Paul and dragged him off toward the front of the house. Dave put an arm around my shoulder and another around Paul's waist, guiding us back into the kitchen. People stood around watching through the open door. "Give us a few minutes," Dave said firmly. "Then you can go." Everyone quickly left. They left, shuffling outside, leaving us alone. Dave closed the door behind them. "Anita," he said, his voice softer now, "told me what she did today. She said she stepped in before she made a huge mistake. I'm still furious with her, but I appreciate her honesty. I thought that bastard was my friend, all while he was trying to seduce my wife. Thank you, Anita." His voice cracked as he pulled her into a tight hug. I was still dazed from Paul's punch. Punch was trying to figure out what had just happened. Had Paul slept with Julia too? What did Anita have to do with it? Dave let go of Anita and turned to me, extending his hand. I was unsure of what else to do, so I shook it. "Nathan," Dave said, his tone apologetic. "I'm sorry. I didn't listen to you after the card game. I should have gotten rid of Paul back then. You couldn't have known." She went to give Julia a stern talking to, not to sleep with that slime ball. It looks like Julia took her advice and left Anita stuck around to confront Paul. Both Han and I saw through Paul's charm offensive. Anita explained, "We talked about his little outburst the night you and Kev left your place. Dave, it was tough to keep a straight face around him after that. Then we saw him looking at Julia when she left earlier today. I had a feeling something was up, so I followed her. Julia was already gone when Paul showed up." Anita continued, "He and I had a little chat about his future with the company. He agreed to announce tomorrow that he had found another job out in California and would give his 2 weeks' notice in. The firm won't pursue him for any number of ethical violations." She sighed. "I had no idea you saw me leaving the motel. No wonder you were furious with Paul. Ah, hell. I really screwed up this time. Anita, when will I learn to trust you? I embarrassed you in front of everyone." I said, "I'm so sorry. I really am. I wouldn't worry too much." Anita's mother, Margaret, chimed in, entering the room with Kev Han and our 2 kids close behind her. "Everyone thought you were about to go after Paul, but Anita stepped in. Marshall might be looking for his teeth in the parking lot, and you'd have the cops knocking on your door. I don't blame you, Nathan. If anyone insulted me, I'd be the same. If I were in Anita's shoes, I'd probably do the same. I'm proud of Anita for marrying you." Margaret continued with a smile. "She was proud of her for stopping you from doing something you'd regret. I knew you'd calm down the second she got between you and that idiot." She chuckled. "I've always had that effect on her father, too. You went all soft the moment she stepped in." "You weren't worried?" Dave asked, "about me taking out Paul, Mom?" "Dave, you're a lawyer," Margaret teased. "Your hands aren't exactly weapons now. Look at his chest and shoulders. Marshall was in real danger for a moment. You gave him a few bruises, but he'll be fine in a couple of days. What about Nathan? He's also got a nasty bruise on his cheek. Any suggestions for that?" At Hans's words, I realized my left eye was completely closed and my head was pounding. I hadn't noticed how bad it was until then. "Why don't you take your husband upstairs, get his clothes off, and get him in the jacuzzi?" Margaret suggested, with a grin. "I'll send one of the kids up with an ice pack, then once he's settled, take off your own clothes and show him how much you love him. Don't worry, we'll still be partying when you get back." "Do you have to say that in front of the kids?" Mom Han asked, her face flushing red. "Oh, don't get all prim and proper with me," Margaret replied, laughing. "These kids and all of you grown ones should know the secrets to a 50-year marriage," she added. It's been a year of marriage, and it's clear that showing affection is important, especially when your partner has been defending the family. Anita, take care of your husband. Less than an hour later, Anita and I were back at the party, chatting with guests. It seemed like everyone had heard Margaret's advice on marriage and teased us about making sure ours lasted. I have to admit, Margaret might just be onto something.